Ah, super.
Ok, merci. Hello. Hello everyone, welcome to everyone. Sorry for the delay, we will be starting now the special session on the future of equality beyond Beijing plus 25. Very briefly, the aim of the session is to discuss the role and the contribution in the meetings that will be held in next March 2020 in New York, that will celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Action Plan. This is in line with the UCLG strategy that we are willing to work a lot with the regional sections, and I insist on this point. Sorry. So the session, I will now call the participants to the session. Please, I want to. I would like first to introduce. I don't know if she's there. The president. I don't know where is she. Jean-Baptiste. The president of Salga, Tembi Ndimeng, Nkadimeng, sorry. Then I will welcome the facilitator of the first panel on local and regional governments and SDG 5 on gender equality, Mrs. Lucy Slack. Deputy Secretary General of the Commonwealth Local Government Forum, CLGF. I will now welcome Mrs. I don't know. She's there. Mrs. Roy Maiglo, Mayor of Banjul, will be taking part in the first panel also. Welcome, Mrs. Carola Gunnarsson, CMR spokesperson on coalition policy and first vice president of the Swedish Association of Local Authorities and Regions. Mrs. Evgenia Lodvigova, vice mayor of Kazan. And Mrs. Noreini Roslan, mayor of Subangjaya. And I will also welcome Mrs. Anna Falou, who will be facilitating the second panel that will be on the empowerment, to empower, the women condition and the Beijing plus 25 meetings sessions. So welcome to everyone, and I will give the floor now to Mrs. President of Salga to have some introductory words.
Thank you very much. My name is Tembi Nkadimeng. It is usually a difficult surname to pronounce, but thank you very much for the opportunity. And let me start by greeting our participants and also the panel here. An indication is made that our names are not stated properly. I did not get how many minutes I have, but I was told I can try and put the matter into the table and precisely give an input with regard to progress that has been made in South Africa and the representation of women. And I will start generally from the country and zoom in into local government. I think we've seen quite a lot of progress, firstly, and our progress in the country is legislated. We have legislated 50% representation, which comes from our Agenda Equity Bill. And discussions are still onward and ongoing for an increase of 50% to possibly a higher number than that, 60%, etc. So act itself to be able to live by the standards of gender parity and representation. was sitting with the sixth administration, subsequently to 50%. And now that 50% has been achieved, we are now growing in towards discussions and deliberations of the increment. That did not come easy, one must accept, but two, it comes with a lot of capacity building and programs that are initiated by government, both politically and administratively, to be able to generate this leadership, capacitated, and be able to have it leading at all times. There have been challenges, as we will all know, in initiation of this. I think the part that is legislated that I forget as well is that the bill is then also audited by our State SA. State SA is our research institute which deals with our census. So the compliance of government institutions and state-owned institutions is audited and reported. And the last non-financial census was held in 2015. So it's not only tabulated, but it's assessed and it has to be reported to the National Assembly, which is our highest body. Currently, we've got 257 municipalities in various categories. We call them metros. We've got 8. We've got district municipalities, which mostly in the world are called regional municipalities. There are 44, and we've got 205 local municipalities. We're sitting at about 42% in terms of female representation. We actually have been coming higher. Sometimes the turnover of mayors is much faster than one would anticipate. As I've said, we are coming from national elections in May. We've seen quite a lot of female mayors who have moved into provincial legislature and national government, which is a very positive sign for local government. And they were mayors, and they are now ministers, they are now deputy ministers, they are now members of the executive councils, what we call the head of cabinets in provincial government. So much as we have seen that decline of that 43 to around 39 as we are sitting currently, but it's a good 4% decline, because we did not lose them out of the system, but actually we lost them at local government to be promoted to higher spheres and echelon of government. Replacement, as the policy is mandatory, regional municipalities had to make sure that they abide by the policy. How did we overcome the challenges? I think the unity of women has been very critical and sacrosanct in this matter. SALGA has a women commission where women sit, councillors sit themselves, develop and design what they think is important for them, and customize the training that are necessary to develop women, to make sure that all the platforms that we are participating in, could it be Beijing, could it be all United Nations, our SDG 3, to make sure that women are a center of the development of the world, are aligned to. It's one thing to sign a treaty, but not to put resources and mechanisms for such to be available is what is a challenge. Yes, we still have to build self-esteem into our women, particularly that we all know it's very difficult to be a female politician. It's not that the self-esteem is not there, but the challenges of ensuring that you deal with the balance of what a woman culturally is meant to be, to support the home, build a family, etc., together with juggling the role of being a politician, does necessitate that we need to put special and focused support for women for them to be able to succeed. What we have done excellently is to tap into the new potential. We've got quite a number of this 39% of young women who are female mayors themselves, and that is a foundation for us to be able to ensure that there is that sustainability, continuity, so that as we train, we are able to make a livable impact into our people. I think, let me end there. I see you're saying I'm left with 1 minute, but there's quite a lot that has been done, and we'll interact towards questions to make sure that all is well. And welcome to South Africa. We're happy to host you.
Thanks very much, Mayor Kadimeng. And I think allow me just to also say a warm welcome to everybody here in the room. I think that we have an incredibly kind of packed series of panels. So we have 2 panels today. This one, which will focus exclusively on SDG 5, so the goal around empowering women and girls. And then the second panel, which will look more in a more focused way towards Beijing plus 25. Without further ado, can I just acknowledge that we have a really broad church of representatives in the room today. I'm glad that we have a mixed group, so we're not just talking to women. Very much, I think, the message, Mayor, that you were just giving us. We've got a mixed group, and we've also got representatives from the very highest levels of local government, grassroots and other partner organizations working collectively with local government leaders on this really critical issue. And maybe just 3 little points from your presentation to kind of get us into the next speeches. I think, or presentations, I should say. I think this point about we have to actively work together. This work is not done. This is a very active process that we're involved in. We really need to think about how gender integrates across everything that we do. And I think particularly your last point around compliance, but also around unity and the unity of women working together to support other women. And I mean, maybe we should actually congratulate those women who have gone on from local government and are now represented in other spheres of government. I think that's a really great story. But you haven't come here to listen to me. You've come here to listen to our very esteemed panelists. The first panelist that we have is Mrs. Carola Gunnarsson, who represents CEMR, the European section of UCLG, and she is the spokesperson on cohesion policy and also the vice president of the Swedish Local Government Association. So I'm sure a lot of experience in this area, Carola. And one of the things that we'd really sort of like to ask you to share is a little bit about what CEMR is doing in this space to support women in local government. And also the work of the European section to promote women's participation and representation. And why you think women's participation in politics is important, and why are we still fighting the fight towards greater equality at the local level?
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me to this session. As was said, I'm the spokesperson of CEMR, the European section of UCLG, and the first vice president of the Swedish Association of Local Authorities and Regions. But I have also been the mayor of my municipality for 15 years and been represented on both the local, regional and national level. So I really know from the beginning of the 70s how things goes when you are women in politics. And of course, it's very important today to talk about SDG 5, because SDG 5 is about gender equality. And that's, of course, the reason why we have to discuss that goal. But it's not only a question of reaching the goal SDG 5, it's a question of human rights. Women participation is a question of human rights. But it is also a question of, if you would like to reach sustainable development in your society, then you need all the knowledge, all the experiences, all the ideas, and all the energy among your citizens. And then, of course, you need to take in account both women and men together to work for a sustainable development of your society. And I think that now when we have gathered together here in Durban, we have the opportunity to recall the ambitions and the commitments that for gender equality that has been outlined so many times at so many occasions during the last years. And 2020 will be an important year for women's rights and gender equality. It's not only 5 years since the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, but it will also be the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration. And the important role we have on local and regional governments and international government organizations such as UCLG must be recognized, because we play an important role if we would like to fulfill the commitments we have done. And we have the power to put in action these commitments and to mainstream gender across all areas. Okay, progress has been made, but we all know that there remains a lot of things to be done. And indeed, many of the inequalities that was addressed in Beijing 25 years ago persist today. In fact, the present decade has witnessed a visible drive against gender equality and women's rights across continents. We are experiencing a backlash which targets the institutional and policy framework for gender equality, including gender mainstreaming, social and labor protection, education, sexual and reproductive health and rights, and the prevention and combating of violence against women. Some weeks ago, I went to Turkey to take part in a seminar held by UN Women, and we were going to talk about how to prevent violence against women in politics. And I thought when I was going there that I had a lot of theoretical impacts to talk about. But at the same time, when I went there to Ankara, the same week, two of my fellow colleagues in Sweden, two young girls who was the mayors in their cities, left their duties because of harassment and threats. And then we are talking about Sweden. Sweden celebrating 100 years of democracy, 100 years since women were allowed to vote and be elected as politicians. So this happens all over the world. And that's the reason why we must join together, we must work together, and we must do our best to prevent this. Today, I think it's important that we, as a result of this session and the result of the work within United Cities and Local Governments General Assembly, make a strong statement towards CSW 64, because we need to underline the importance of the local level and the need of activity against violence for women, but also to make possible for women to be a part of the political life on all levels. And therefore, the European section of UCLG has presented a paper that is available over there, a paper that is a statement about these gender equality questions. And I hope we can adopt this paper in this session and take it to the next level and to adopt it at the World Council, because now it's time to be concrete and it's time to be determined about these questions. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Carola. Really, I think putting everything very firmly into context of how far we still have to go and the need to turn that into really transformative action at the international level, at the global level where we all participate, but also fundamentally at the local level where we're all active and where we can support our colleagues in local government. I'm now going to give the floor to our colleague, the Mayor of Banjul, Mrs. Rohi Malik Low. And I'm going to just ask a quick question of you. I think we're all very aware that addressing poverty is very much at the core of the SDGs. And I wonder if you might just reflect a little bit on the link between women's participation specifically in politics and the struggle against poverty in Africa. Maybe think a little bit from your own personal perspective, but also your experience generally across the continent. And also linked to that, maybe a little bit about your experience of the links between local government leaders, local government politicians, and civil society.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. You talk about two things here that is really very dear to my heart. That is the SDGs and, of course, gender equality. When we talk about gender equality, most people take it as a female issue, or better say, as a woman issue. For those who does not know me, my name is Rohiatu Malik Low, and I am the Lord Mayor of Banjul, that is the capital city of the Gambia. I did it deliberately to introduce myself, to allow the general public to just think twice. An African lady, an African woman being a mayor in the capital. However, the first main problem in the Gambia, I will narrow it down to the perspective of the Gambia, even though the moderator is talking about the continent, as he said. But I can tell you, in Africa, we have the same problems. In the Gambia, the first problem we have is to create the enabling environment through policies. Many policies are ratified, but they are not implemented. This is the very big problem that we are having in the Gambia. And if you ask me who are those that are supposed to implement these policies, of course, they are the politicians. And who are they? Who are those politicians who have the majority? I will leave that answer with you. The policies that are ratified are not mostly implemented, causing a lot of inequality in the political leadership and economic diversity between the sexes. As I said, when talking about gender equality, many think it's only about women. But, Madam Moderator, please allow me to put it in the perspective of women. Politicians in Gambia, or better say in Africa, are not keen in implementing policies that can change the lives of women, simply because women are used as a political tool to campaign, dancing, and voting for our men counterparts. And this is not only to do with central government, but in our own political parties. We are used as tools. If you go to most African political parties, women are the very one who will wake up early, line up after campaigning to vote for them, and in the executive, we represent in maximum not more than 20%. At least I can proudly say that my political party in Gambia has at least a 30% representative as a woman, of women. But how many parties are in Africa that have 20% or 30% of women representing them in the executive of their parties? So therefore, Madam Moderator, it has to start in our own houses. Desensitization has to start in the house. And then in the community. And from there, I am sure our political parties will listen, and the central government, that will force the central government to start implementing the policies. But we are not going anywhere if we as women are the very one who are fighting each other. And this is the reality. I am an example. I have a very nasty campaign, a very nasty one. And who were the very one that we are bringing up the stereotyping? My fellow women. You know why? Because 52% of the population of the Gambian are women. And if I have to depend on that, I could have just gone home and rest and wait for the day of the elections. And who were the very one that I was competing with? Men. I was contesting with 7 men. But still, they were able to stand on platforms and say whatever they want and go to bed and sleep well. Whereas I have to go home and face my own family, who will sit me down and say, look, we are tired of this. Get out of this field because of what? The stereotyping. And who are the one pressing the like buttons in the Facebook? They are the very women. But you know why? Because the men, politicians, does not give us a room for sensitization. They don't want us to know our value. They don't want us to know that we have right to represent ourselves. Sensitization, as I said, Madam Moderator, is a big problem. As a mayor, I have a very small budget. And gender equality has to do with financing, especially when you bring it in the context of Africa. So if you don't have money, you don't have, the central government is hostile when it comes to giving money for the sensitization of gender equality. Because as I just said before, it's not to their advantage. And the stakeholders, the bureaucracy is stopping them from coming to the local government. So they are directly dealing with the central government. And central government is blocking whatever has to do with the sensitization of women empowerment. So I think it's very, very important, Madam Moderator, to try to see how best, which ways we can take. We can sit here and talk and talk and talk. If our central governments, our political parties are not listening, of course we have to give credit to men who are sitting here. They are the ones I call the he, she. We have many men that are always standing for the empowerment, of course, empowerment of women. Recently, I launched Rafaela, just to elaborate a little bit of my strategies. Of course, the frustration is there, but thank God we have UCLG that gave us the platform to have what we call today Rafaela, where women can network and our voices can be heard. I launched Rafaela in my country, and I attracted over 15,000 to 16,000 women. It was so successful, and I have to thank UCLG for giving me that platform, but I have to thank also UN, especially the UN representative in my country, Aisatuddin, who stood with me during these 3 days. It was expensive. It was a very tough challenge. But today, with that 15 or 16,000 women who were there, we have what we call Rafela chapters in all regions in the Gambia, and nobody can stop us. Rafela is moving in the Gambia. We have civil societies. We have civil society people who are members of the Rafela. We have teachers. We have nurses. And we have, of course, men who are part of this Rafela. And I can tell you what. Get back to your regions and try to inaugurate Rafela. Put your chapters in order. And Rafela is the wind that will change the leadership of Africa. Madam Moderator, if you ask the African woman about gender equality or women empowerment, we don't stop. I can keep talking until 1 hour. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Madam Mayor. And you took the words right out of my mouth. Obviously a subject that you feel very passionate about. And thank you for reminding us of the need for a call to action. And I think one of the things which is interesting is the fact that we really also need to think about how we inculcate a culture of equality from the very family level, and how we can try and make sure that political parties are on board in terms of gender equality. Madam Mayor, thank you. I'm very conscious that this is only the first of 2 panels, so I'm going to just say to my other 2 panelists, please, if you can keep your responses as brief as you possibly can, because I think everybody in the room is very much keen to hear all of the panelists. So maybe let me just pass across to the Vice Mayor of Kazan, Ms. Evgenia Lodvigova, and she is obviously a mayor deputy mayor in Kazan, and we'd just like you to share a little bit your experience of women's participation in your particular municipality, and also SDG 5 and how the municipality is implementing SDG 5.
Thank you, dear moderator. Thank you, colleagues. I prefer to talk in Russia. If you have their equipment, it will be good. I don't know the number of channel, but I think that you can find it.
The channel number is 1. Well, following that expressive speech by my colleague from Gambia, of course it is hard, but also it is of great interest for me to tell you about the experience that we're seeing being deployed in my native city of Kazan and in the Eurasian region that I represent here. Well, I hope you can hear me now. I hope you can hear the translation. I come from Kazan. This is the 3rd city in Russia. It is a very big city. Our population is 1,200,000 people, which is a lot for a Russian city. And first, I think I will tell you how the rights of women are upheld by and supported in our city, and then I will pass over to the Eurasian region, which I represent. Much like I told you, our city is a big one with a population of 1,200,000 people. We have executive authorities, we have legislating authorities. Well, our deputies are elected. I'm also a deputy. I'm the first deputy of the mayor of Kazan, and we have 42 deputies now. 19 of them are women out of 42, just so you know the gender balance that we have established for now. As for executive authorities here, the situation is sadder, unfortunately, because mostly there we have men, as it is mostly men who deal with urban and city issues that we can see in all and every city all over the world. I want to tell you now that the specific feature of our city is that 50% of citizens are Muslim and 50% are Orthodox Christians. Historically in Russia, the situation has been that in cities like that, especially in Muslim families, women never worked. And they played the role of, they kept the household. Women did. And in Kazan, we have established this gender balance in our government, which is very significant because it didn't used to be this way. As for Eurasia, as a region, is the region that I represent, is represented by 12 countries. And there, all over those countries, there is a major challenge of a lack of women in government positions, because 10 years ago, the situation with the representation was very bad. Now the representation is growing, or it has been growing, and owing to UCLG in venues like this one, and due to the initiatives that we have all over the world, all of them contribute to improving the situation in Eurasia. In general, my assistant has been distributing these magazines or journals to you. Right before we left for Durban, we had no idea that we would be invited. I would be invited to this session, and we came up with this huge analysis on Eurasia, showing you the representation of women holding government positions across the different cities, how they feel holding those positions, what projects they're in charge of. It offers you some extensive statistics here. One statistics I will tell you now. For 100 men who are employed in Eurasia, the number of employed women. Look at page 46. It's in Russian and in English. In Russia, for 100 employed men, there is 79 employed women. So it's more than half. And now, soon, I hope we'll reach parity. We are going there, which is a good thing. As I told you, historically, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan have been those countries where women didn't used to work, to be employed, and you have to factor it in, keep that in mind. And now their representation in governments is growing, which is a great thing. Also, I would like to tell you about the aspects that we are mindful in Russia and Eurasia. We hold gender equality forums quite often, as the G5 that we're talking about here is one of the most important goals of sustainable development for us, which is always being discussed in Eurasian cities and in the cities that represent Eurasia. Thank you very much for your attention.
Deputy Mayor, and I think one of the things which is really important in terms of the kind of points that you were making there is to actually make that connection between economic opportunities and the opportunity to be active politically, and I think thank you very much for that. I have one more panelist on my panel, the Mayor of Subang Jaya from Malaysia. And I know that you've been working a lot, Madam Mayor, on more inclusive development in your city, and I wonder whether you could just tell us a little bit about that and a bit the role that you see for local government in the struggle for gender equality.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. When I talk about inclusive development and getting everybody, especially the marginalized, into the mainstream, and to include women in the marginalized group, the rest of my colleagues laughed at it because they don't understand it. What marginalized situation now women in Malaysia is. they go to school. There's more women in universities than men. And as far as if merit is concerned, 50% of my head of departments are women. But the fact is, only until 2015 was the first mayor, women mayor is appointed. And that was me. What does it say? I mean, if you do not recognize that women are being marginalized as leaders, as decision makers, as the politicians, as my friend from Banjul is saying, then you're not putting us at an equal level. Because if the decision makers are still left to men, there are perspectives of women that has not being taken into considerations. Now we have a women minister for local government, and she keeps reminding me that my responsibility is to bring these women perspectives into all the decision making that I make. Even to the matter of the size of toilets, if it's suitable for women more than men. Because nobody thinks about it. If all the architects are men, then the kitchens will be kept minimal and the cupboards will be put at 6 feet level that we can't reach. The smallest things, what more the biggest thing. So as I becomes more involved in this SDGs and this leaving no one behind philosophy, I asked myself, what can I do as women mayors? So from last year, I have this action plan aiming at women being the first women-friendly city in Malaysia. So what does it take to become that? We have a workshop calling women and women lovers into that workshop and asking them what is it that they feel that we can become better at accommodating women's need. And we found out that it's not that much different, basically, from what all human rights. So this comes back to the human rights, what everybody wants. But there are specific areas that we have identified, and we have formulated 4 strategies. One including the basic amenities, infrastructure and amenities. And it comes to the point that if we provide pavement, footpath, for example, the type of tiles that we choose to put on our footpath matters to women. Because we wear different types of shoes. We wear stilettos sometimes. And we have strollers pushing children, babies, that men don't take that into account. And some architects put this cobblestone out of fancy, not thinking of who are going to use them later. And the number of toilets that needs to be enlarged for women's use, and the women carry babies into the toilets. We carry shopping bags. These are the kinds of things that women identified, women in my city identified, that they need attention from. Other than that, it's the livelihood of women among the bottom 20 in the society. If we are to include everybody, I have to go there. And we have these low-cost houses, complexes, that if we live on their own, they are not even managed to form a committee, a resident committee. But once assisted, this low-cost residents are able to do wonders on their own. It is called capacity building, empowering, but looking into specifically what they need and understanding how it works with them, and partnering with many universities, civil societies. There are lots of resources out there that we haven't harnessed. There are a lot of people who wants to help, but we need to go down and identify their problems. When that is done, we can network with all the helps out there, all the resources out there. And one example that I give is women who have no means of income before, but once we go in, they are now entrepreneurs. And we help them to market their products through our websites, And there are children that were not taken care of when their mothers go to work. Now they have places because we have this reading corners, we have this hopscotch area and places that children can go to when their mothers are not around, at least some adults. Because I am worried of molestation, of things happening to children when they're not supervised. And I do continue with this big girls talk, teaching young girls who are going into adulthood the perils of unsecured sex and things like that, but because no men mayors want to talk about this. So there are so many things that women mayors can bring into the cities that men mayors may not think about. And to forge ahead, to be persistent in this, does not necessarily takes money. It just takes creativity, it takes boldness to go into territories that it's not even our responsibility, but it may be other departments' responsibility. But being mayors, you just garner people together and be creative and be persistent enough. And being technical person, I always have targets in front and where we are now and how we are going to achieve them. I mean, I can talk on and on, but that's for now.
Thank you, Merasian, for that. And thank you to all the panelists. I think some very kind of shared issues around really starting at the family level, around how local government really can be a player in terms of making a difference, in terms of planning, in terms of the importance of political parties. And I'm sure there'll be other points which will come up in the next session. Now, there's a couple more speakers about to come up to the podium. I'm going to pass over to Anna Falu now, who's going to facilitate the next session, and she's UCLG's Ubuntu advisor on gender equality.
Well, I'm going to try to do a miracle because we are running against time, but I'm going to invite, first I want to invite Marianne. It's just a second, please. I want to have properly the names. Marianne Overton. Thank you, Marianne. You're here. Mrs. Fatimetou Abdel Malik, please. Would you like to join us? Is Mrs. Yeah, is she here? Okay, thank you very much. And also I want to invite Mrs. Makakura Kulibali Dao, please. Thank you very much. Is she here? No? Mrs. Makoura Kulibali Dao is not with us? Yeah? Thank you very much. Well, while we all join this panel, I just want to congratulate all the ladies that precede and had the word in the first panel, all very inspiring. And I want to thank Emilia Sainz, the Secretary of ULGC, because without the will of inclusion and the will of having these women's voices in here, we will not have this panel. So I want an applause for Emilia. And thank you for being here with us. I was asked to refer to Beijing plus 25. We are 25 years after that 4 World Conference on Women that took place in Beijing, China, in 95. The Beijing conference had 2 significant sections. The official one, where the Platform for Action, the worldwide adopted Women's Platform for Action, and the NGOs and social and grass women's movements in the Waidu, a town close to Beijing. There took place the first meeting of what now we call and know as the Waidu Commission, a network of networks working for habitat, territories, women's empowerment. I think that we have to say that the Beijing conference was one among other conferences in the late 90s, in the mid-90s, as the conferences on the critical issues of the 20th century. And the 20th century was the century of our rights, the rights of child, the right of women, the right of indigenous people, the right of black people. I mean, was the century in which we define our rights. I think the 21st century should be the century of the implementation of those rights we won in all those processes. Those were processes mainly. More important than the moment was the process. And the process is still ongoing. And in that process, we have to say that central issues of our agenda were not included, were not considered, as for instance, local government. Local governments were not included particularly in the platform of action of Beijing. In the year 2000, when we review the platform, for the first time, the local authorities and the local governments were included. And also climate change was not included, because in the 95, that was an issue, but not the critical issue it is today for our agendas. But mainly, I have to say that we women, with our voices, from grassroots, politicians, professionals, and in all our diversity, we are able to argument for those two critical issues of the platform of action. Just not to take the microphone and give the floor to my colleagues here, I will say that Carol and Marianne and Roy and Thembi already addressed two very critical issues we need to put attention. For instance, political participation of women. I mean, it was so clear in the way that it was said here that from the Russian colleague, that when there is a law for achieving more parity, I'm not saying parity, we have more women in parliaments and in councils, but that doesn't really modify the executive and the technicians in power. That is a challenge we have at the local authorities, because we need to transform those ways of thinking the society and to make sure that women's voices and women's needs, different from other needs, should be included. Violence is not only the violence on our bodies that limit to our freedoms. Violence is also the violence in the public spaces, the violence into women into politics, the violence in economics field, the violence of women that are all more educated than men in every level and do not have paid formal jobs. Yeah? So these are the key questions we need to interrogate and to transform. I want to please invite Marianne Overton, yeah, as the vice chairman of the Local Governments Association and the Lincolnshire County Councillor and North Casemont District. And I would like you to please tell us how the international community is, or what do you think about the way to improve the condition of women in this arena?
Thank you very much indeed. And I'd like to say a huge thank you to the other speakers. I have been very inspired sitting here and also realizing how many people in this room have worked really hard and achieved so much for equality. So a huge thank you to you and to our speakers. I'm a councillor, and then I've been elected for the national body, so I represent England as well today, and so I'm vice chairman of that body. We have 20,000 councillors in around 450 local authorities. So we can work together, and we can do a lot when we work together. And I think that's what's really important, is that we use the tools that we have. So we have ourselves, and the power is in ourselves. There's a lot we can do. But also, if we work together through the other authorities, through the local government associations, through CMR, through UCLG, if we all speak together with one voice, think how many people that represents. That's huge. So I really hope that today you will all want to support the recommendations so that we can have a set of things that we agree to do, a set of actions. And working together, that will be such a powerful voice. I want to say a little bit about why I think it's important that we are here in Durban today. I had coffee this morning with two people who were freedom fighters, who fought for racial equality right here, and won. Now we must do it for gender equality and for the other equalities, for poverty and money as well. We have a way to go. But we can see how much can be achieved by people working really hard to achieve that objective and working together. A very, very hard time. But let us move forward, because the other thing I did yesterday was to go and visit the house where I was brought up, which was just 10 miles from here. So I found the very house where I lived and the people who are living there now. And it made me realize that so much has changed in this country. But in some ways, there is still so much to do for here, but also for the world. And particularly, I have to say, in England, I'm speaking for England today, we have a long way to go as well. We have only 35% of our councillors are women. At the very last election, despite all our efforts, it only increased by 1%. Incredible. This makes me think that the legislation, you can only do so much through talking. Actually, some legislation is important. We have 96% of our councils are led by men. 4% are women. And yet we have worked so hard. We have Be a Councillor campaign. We've done all kinds of campaigns to change the culture. We've done training. We've picked out people from different groups of people who maybe haven't come forward before and given them training and support, mentoring, women's networks, and we've created a pool of talent. So once we're elected, we then have to work through the culture. We have to make sure that our councils are civil, that we are polite. It's not good enough to have people hounded out of office for no good reason because of people on Facebook or whatever. It's not good enough. We have to support each other. Lastly, just to tell you of two tools that you can use if you wish. On the Local Government Association for England, there is a toolkit for councils, and it has a list of actions that you can take if you wish. We also have a similar toolkit which we've produced again with the government for making councils and making our organisations more polite, more civil. So a huge thank you to you. It's a real privilege and pleasure to spare this time with you. Thank you.
What a pity not having more time to listen to Marianne. Two main issues. We have to support each other. We have ourselves, and we need to work together. This is the first strong message of Marianne, and I think you, LGC, have the challenge to do this, and certainly we can achieve that. And for that, also, the second message, a strong message of Marianne, the recommendation. Yeah? And there is a recommendation that was worked by women members of ULGC that should be adopted and hopefully should be adopted by this meeting. Yeah? Thank you very much. And now I would like to invite Madame Fatouma Osman to please address to us on your experience. You have there. Oh, I thought you had a mic.
Merci. D'abord, j'aurais aimé que le panel comporte des hommes.
Right. In fact, we should have a panel also consisting of men so that we can all well or better understand the problematic or the issues of that women are faced with. Now, you know, we all agree on equality and texts and laws and political will exists, it's true, but very often the application or the implementation of these laws is not up to scratch. So there are a number of different forms of equality or inequality, but I would say that the one that exists between men and women is the most cruel one. And it is not really a question of equality, it's also a question of justice, it's a question of rights. It's a question of well-being of society. It's a question that focuses on development, because we cannot, once again, leave more than 50% of the population without being regarded. We cannot also focus on development without including that important part of the population. So to give you a little bit of context, I can say to you that we have advantages, we have good points as well, but we also have many obstacles and many problems that actually hinder the development of women. Among our positive points, we have laws that are very good, but we also have the demographic dividend, which I spoke about earlier on, which comes to more than 50%. We have a life expectancy, a higher life expectancy. Women have a higher life expectancy. So I would say that projects are more likely to succeed if you take women into account. But we also have a consciousness with the creation of the movement, and the mayor of Banjul talked about it just now. We have a mobilized civil society, but we especially have an organization of local deputies and other organizations that support women. And of course, we cannot forget all of the international organizations such as UN Women, for example. But that is not enough, because when we talk about Beijing and what has been achieved up to now, is that there has been quite a bit of development, evolution in our country. The SDGs were not there yet at the time of Beijing. They were, since then, new formulations of laws, new reforms favorable to women, but despite all of that, there were still a lot of obstacles. I'm going to talk about a few, and about the ones that exist in Africa, which I know well. As you know, women have stayed illiterate. They have stayed illiterate, which means that they are poor, because it's closely linked. If we are illiterate, then we are poor, basically. They manage very few funds in Africa. Even if they contribute up to 80% to nutrition or food production in Africa. They don't manage. There are also very few women present as employers, beg your pardon, because they also are not really found in elective posts, even if there has been evolution and development. And why? Because the mayor from Banjul has mentioned it, because they don't have money to finance their campaigns, because they don't have the means and they are poor and they're not eligible for obtaining funds from banks. That is that is the way it is, because they don't have guarantees. They are also absent in administrations, even if there has been progress, especially in my country. Women have occupied sovereign posts, for example. But, and again, with regard to local governments, which I come from, because that's my area, we are called upon, us as women, managers of territorial collective we have to focus on women-based policies to facilitate safe transport for women, for example, to have centers for women so that they can also balance life, family life and work life. You mentioned it. It doesn't escape anybody but territorial collectivities or communities, because we need to provide all the support to give them support, like us, to obtain and in the resolution of conflict. So here I launch an appeal. I call upon everyone to integrate mechanisms to prevent and to have resolutions, crisis resolutions, because as you know, women in Africa, she can bring together a number of countries. In fact, it's the woman who is able to do that, and it's there to restore, to bring peace about. Very often, they are the ones who protect the terroir, the areas. Others will leave and will go and look for work. Men do, but women will look after, will stay in the territory, in the terroir, in the fields. They will need to also be supported, because we need to develop their capacities, their skills. They need to be able to be independent. Rural women who should not have to carry or cover many kilometers to go and find water and wood. This has to change, and I really do hope that the declaration that we are going to adopt in a moment will be able to achieve all of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I was exactly going to ask you also around the 1325 resolution, because it's also something that, and you address at the end of your comments. And again, time is against us. I think that Fatimetou gave us some very important key messages, yeah, around inequalities and the importance of the international organization, but she said very clear, it's not enough. We need to work on the territories. And she said two main challenges. Women in Africa are the poorest, and women in Africa are illiteracy. So those are two main challenges to overcome if we really want to advance toward the rhetoric of the laws and what we achieve. That is not less, but is still in the level of the rhetoric of the governments. And also, finally, she said, we need to work for the peace and the development of the women that stay in the territories. And this is central. Women are the ones that stay, as she say, in the territories, with the children, with providing food, providing wood, providing water, and mainly the women in the rural territories. So thank you very much for your very highlighting comments. And now I want to invite Fatuma Osman, yeah, to please the mayor of Djibouti, Am I pronouncing correct? Thank you very much.
Je vais parler en français. Bonjour tout le monde.
Good day. Hello, everyone. My name is Fatouma Malouessan. I am the mayor of the capital of Djibouti, and it's the first time as well that a woman has become a mayor of the city. And in the beginning, it was very difficult. In the beginning, it was difficult for a woman to present herself for a community or local and regional elections. But then afterwards, as you know, women work much harder than men. And that is something to be proud of. So, you know as well that here I'm halfway of my term. I was elected in 2017 in March, and it's a term of 5 years, and it will end in 2022. Last year in Marrakesh in 2018, I also became a member of the bureau of Refela, and I created Refela in Djibouti. I am also the chairperson of the National Association of Local Governments in Djibouti. It's a young association which brings together all the communities of Djibouti, and the Republic of Djibouti consists of one city, which is the capital city, and 5 regions. So we have created this association to bring to the highest levels of decentralization and to be able to talk, because there is a ministry in charge of decentralization. So this association plays a very important role in Djibouti. And today I also wanted to talk to you in the name of the chairperson of Refela, and I would like to read you the message of Madame Kouliboula, who would have liked to be present here today. But as you know, the mayors are very busy, and I do hope that I will read her message. It's Madame Kouliba. She is the chairperson of Refela, and who is also the vice president or chairperson of Refela for West Africa. Here we go. So this is her message. Madam Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, and representatives of the regional section, ladies and gentlemen, mayors of regional governments and local governments, and honorable participants of this session. It's an honor for me to participate in the session of very great importance to prepare the conference of the United Nations in March next year, which will deal with the Beijing 20+25 since the meeting in 1995, and to review all of the achievements that have been reached since the program, and also the obstacles and challenges that need to be met since then, and to be able to fully realize the SDG number 5, to be able to achieve independence and emancipation of women and girls by 2030. And it is in this context that I represent the leader of the network of women leaders of Refela, which constitutes or makes up the Commission, the Permanent Committee of Gender Equality in Africa, and which is active in launching the voice of African women. And in this regard, I would like to present to you the 4 main messages as a contribution of Refela to for the preparation of the conference of Beijing +25. First message: the women's challenges are still manifold in Africa, and are expressed much greatly in the cities and territories where they live and are active, and they continue to be subject to different forms of violence, and are very little represented at the level of executives and in decision-taking positions, and are limited in developing also their entrepreneurial and economic development. Second message: Refela also realized an online consultation platform to enable platforms with the CCRE or the CEMR, and of which the results with regard to the interest of the local communities was brought, and which talks and focuses on gender equality in local communities. The mayor for most countries is still limited in African countries and needs to focus on the fight against discrimination against women and girls, whose power is feeble in terms of human, material and financial support. To act efficiently, to be able to to face this kind of violence or challenges to which girls and women are faced, and to be active in their respective territories. Of course, the third message, we need to realize that some progress was made since the first World Conference everywhere in the world, including in Africa. RIFELA itself, which is a group of mayors, plays an important and appropriate role. However, if in 2020 is an important year for the accelerated realization of gender equality and emancipation of all women and all girls everywhere in the world, and it is important to be able to reach the SDGs by 2030. For African women, there is still a need to double efforts and to increase mobilization to be able to overcome these or reach these deadlines as predicted, with having achieved certain results regarding a transformation in their lives, and to fully exercise their rights and emancipation. Fourth message, this World Conference, Beijing 25, which will take place in the United Nations in New York in 2020, and which will involve a number of United Nations organizations and member states and organizations, NGOs from all the regions of the world, is an opportunity to review and to renew the declaration and to relaunch the action plan of Beijing, which is characterized mainly by the institutionalization and integration of the dimension of gender, to be able to develop and to be able to go towards integrate gender in all levels of local, regional and national governments. If we need to take into account all of the challenges to be able to reach gender equality and to ensure emancipation of women and girls with regard, in the context of ODD, and it can only be reached if women and girls are resilient and with regard to SDG. So thank you very much for your kind attention, and I'm sorry for having been slow.
Thank you very much. This is a very powerful panel. Thank you very much to all the women here, to all these powerful, interesting ladies. And I just want to stress two messages. Fatuma gave us a lot. Starting for saying that we should be proud of our achievements. I think you are right, Fatuma. And in your case, being in the Young Local Authorities Network, I think that is something that is close to what Marianne said to us. We have each other. Thank you very much to everybody, but I want to come back for this closing to the proposal that should be debated, circulated, that will be very important if it is adopted by this meeting, and that we can take it to the CSW 64 in New York for the Beijing 25. Thank you very much to everybody, and thank you to the audience. Pity the time is against us always. Thank you.
Anna, thank you very much. We've just, I gather, have about 10 minutes because we really appreciate that this has been a really inspiring panel. And we want to make sure that you just have an opportunity to feed some of your thoughts in, to ask questions of some of these really inspiring women. So we're stealing back about 10 minutes from the last session. I've got someone here who I know is very keen to speak, Jocelyn Boujard, who's the Deputy Mayor of Rennes. and also the former president of the CMR Standing Committee on Gender Equality. So maybe without further ado, I'm going to pass to you. And if others in the hall would like to ask a question or would like to make a comment and would like to add their commitment to the manifesto going forward to Beijing plus 25, we'd really welcome that.
Merci. J'aimerais vous faire part. Thank you, dear friends. I want to talk about an initiative which was made by our local collectivities group at the beginning of the year 2000. This project, this action, which today is being developed, has been supported by the European Commission. We have drafted a charter. You will tell me again another proposal. There's so many, but we do share the observation that there are inequalities between men and women amongst themselves. But what has been fantastic with the action we carried out is that we wanted to be considered as local and active councillors calling for action. And after drafting work, gathering colleagues from 28 countries, supported by experts and men and women on gender subjects, we have drafted the European Charter for Equality between men and women within local groups. And this is an exercise about the competencies and the action of municipalities and local collectivities in Europe. Obviously, our competencies may be different, but today we're very happy to talk about the success, the great success of this work, which was fairly ambitious, and we didn't know where we are going to, where we were going to. Today, there are cities, departments, sectors, regions that have signed this charter in 38 European countries. This charter has been translated in 28 languages, and there are about 2,000 town halls and cities that have signed this charter, and not only by the mayors and the vice mayors, who usually are not women. This charter should be implemented by action plans which are specific to each territory, because from one country to another, from one region to another, we're very different. We have priorities, we have different wills and actions to take, but we have started to work, and this is a fantastic thought to know that we can help our friends in African countries to adopt this charter with your own realities, with your own specificities. But indeed, I do recommend this dynamic work, which has been very helpful for each of our country and each of our municipalities. Tomorrow we'll talk about it with Sweden in another panel, and we remain at your disposal for any more detail you wish to know. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to pass over.
Thank you very much for this. Et j'ai encore...
Maybe in the middle, in the blue. Thank you.
Merci. Merci.
Thank you. Just small intervention. I'm Mr. Avissem Tatitali from the Town Hall of Sfax in Tunisia. It's still that there are very few women in politics and within the parties, and to carry out this task with their family life and considering the violent situations which exist in politics. I would like to share an experience, the experience of Tunisia for the municipal elections. The law asked for the vertical and horizontal parity for the candidates. And this parity has enabled us 49% of women could participate in the list, be included in the list, and then 47% succeeded to be included in the presidency of the municipalities, and there are 68 women who are mayors amongst 350. So a percentage of 38%. But the horizontal parity was not binding, so there are fewer women in the list. Another observation, out of 219 political parties in Tunisia, there are only 3 political parties which are chaired by women. So to summarize, and looking at the figures, I see that apart from the sensibilization, the inclusion of women should be ensured by the law, should be binding. Thank you.
Would absolutely concur with that, and thank you for sharing that experience. I'm going to take just one more. I know there are many others in the room who would really like to ask questions of our panel, and I really apologize that we are in the situation where we have to rush you.
Thank you very much. My name is Nongaba Mulwele. I'm a councillor in the city of Johannesburg. I'm a member of Refila and the former vice president in Southern Africa for Refila. I would like to comment on the statement given. Appreciating the input from the panel, I would like to comment on the statement that has been distributed to us. For me, as I'm seated here and reading through this, I think the reason why we are not able to implement the decisions that were made in Beijing and other decisions that were made is because we are not attaching the agenda or the goals with finances. So, or with the budget. I would therefore propose that we stipulate on this document the commitment to gender procurement targets, as well as the establishment of a fund to support women agenda. So I would like that to find expression on the document that, or on the commitment statement that we have been distributed to us. But I would like to add on number 4, which begins with underline. At the end, where it talks about violence against women, I would add that it should reflect as women and girls.
Very good.
Thank you.
I'm just going to hand over very briefly to Carola, who may have some comments on that.
Yes, we think it, and Marianne and I representing CMR then think it was very valuable compliments to the paper, and we will take it with us and make a new paper and present to the World Council, and then we'll take into account what was just said. So thank you very much for your proposal.
Thanks very much. I think a really positive point for us to start to kind of close the session. The last thing I just want to say is to just reinforce that the paper that CMR is putting forward to the sort of UCLG decision-making process will also underpin a wider piece of work that UCLG is working on in terms of a manifesto to take us to Beijing plus 25. And I think one of the things that we would really like to ask you to do whilst you're here this week is to talk to some of the staff, talk to Emilia, talk to Anna Fallu and other colleagues at UCLG who are working on this, Sandra, who is here today as well. This is your opportunity to influence that manifesto. It's very much circulating as a draft at the moment, but this is a really great opportunity for us to make sure that local government's voice is heard strongly in those discussions. And it's very clear from the discussions that we've had here today that there are some very strong and very practical, tangible recommendations that we can make to show how local government can really play a leadership role in achieving gender equality. Thank you from me.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. And please an applause to this panel and to the manifesto we are going to present in Beijing 25. Yeah? Thank you very much, everybody.